Okay, good evening, everyone. Sorry we're 3 minutes late. I'm hoping that clock is an error and that we're really on time, but would like to call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. Welcome. This is the start of a week that the BET might be spending quite a bit of time together, and we'll go over some of that stuff later on. Item number 2, routine applications. Mr. Drake.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move item PW5 from the Department of Public Works, which is on everyone's agenda in front of them, for $215,000.
And the next item?
I'll move the second one, NW3, Nathaniel Witherell, the transfer of $100,500.
Seconded by Mr. Raymer. Discussion on our routine applications. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining. Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve $1,015,000 additional appropriation for Department of Public Works for snow and ice control.
Item has been moved on behalf of the Budget Committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Finger. Committee report followed by discussion.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee met with Dave Thompson and Joe Roberto from the Public Works Department. They talked about due to the harsh winter, the number of frequent storms, the amount of ice control that they had to go through, as well as materials. They needed this amount of money. Just as an example, they have gone through 36,000 cubic yards of salt, which normally in a given year would be about 2,500 square or cubic yards. The committee voted 3-0-0 to approve this additional appropriation.
Discussion on the item? I'd like to make a comment. Our Commissioner of Public Works is here. Obviously, everybody in the town knows this was a sort of an interesting winter, and although when we go outside tonight and it's in the teens, I'm not sure winter's over yet. But I would say that from this board's perspective and everything we've heard comment-wise, thank you. Rough winter, probably rough on equipment, certainly rough on the roads and curbs, but the school system has used up all their snow days. They're hoping for no more snow days, so we'll hopefully get through this. So you know, I really think it's important that we convey that message, and obviously this is a large item. That's why it's non-routine. I don't think I've heard anything controversial on this, so I just wanted to make that note. Okay. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Golder, I didn't even see you there.
I actually just on one matter. Your budget is based on 30 inches of snow a year, I think it said, on a 50-year average. But I'm guessing that is substantially higher over the last dozen years or so. And with what global warming is doing and more moisture in the atmosphere, we should probably be budgeting for more storms and more snow. Can we, going forward in the budget, does it make sense to budget for more salt on hand for more snow?
Well, it's certainly something you can look at. Even last year we had a pretty minor, really getting hard to forecast, but certainly if it's something where the board is amenable to a little bit more elbow room in there, it's something we can look at and move forward with our operating budget.
Anyone else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? 12-0-0. Thank you again. That moves us to item 3 on the agenda, the assessor's report. Hello there. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr.
Welcome.
Members of the BET. I'd like to present the assessor's report for March 2014. Of note, the Board of Assessment Appeals has completed all its hearings and deliberations. The notices shall be sent out to taxpayers tomorrow on March 18th with the Board of Assessment Appeals results of those hearings that they held. The actual reduction we had to the grand list was less than estimated. The actual reduction is $29,764,450. So they actually reduced it less than we had estimated. In addition, we are continuing to contact all seniors to complete the state and local senior property tax relief programs. The local program has been extended, so we will be implementing that in July as we had planned. Okay. Anybody have any questions or concerns?
Okay, I'll accept a motion that these,
I'll move that we accept the assessor's report.
I'd second that.
moved by Ms. Tarkington, seconded by Mr. Raymer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Mr. Menarski, welcome. Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, BET members. You have a copy of the Controller's report. Basically, the first paragraph says it all. We've been extremely busy with the annual budget process, which will culminate this week with a public hearing tomorrow and the vote on the budget Thursday. Another update, I don't think, as far as the Sandy claim, the settlement check, they want to get their release it. It's been in the mail for about the last 3 weeks, so it's hopefully next month when I report, we'll have the $1,417,000, and we should have Art is scheduled an update on FEMA, so we'll have an update on the FEMA numbers for you next month. It's Art with the Audit Committee. I'll answer any questions in the Controller's report or the cash flow report.
Mr. Chairman, can I?
Yes, Mr. Norton, please.
The Audit Committee at its meeting last Thursday received from Risk Manager Director Ron Lally a signed proof of loss, which is what is required before AIG will give us the settlement check. And that was returned to them one day last week, so we should be receiving that check now that we have signed and the proof of loss and returned to them.
Got it. Anything else for Controller? I'll accept the motion.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Norton.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Finger. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining. Thank you. Item number 5 now comes before us.
Move to accept the treasurer's report.
I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report for February. Seconded by Mr. Raymer. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining. 12-0-0.
Just to back up, who moved it? Was it Art?
No, I did.
Art and
Okay,
Raymer.
thank you, Art.
Thank you. BET Standing Committee reports. Mr. Norton, you don't have an audit committee because you just got the minutes,
I
right?
just got the minutes Friday afternoon, but we're going to address one item in a few minutes that was approved by the audit committee. It's under new business.
Okay, good. I just want to make a comment. I didn't make the audit committee. One of the items on there is an item that we've been discussing for about a month and a half now on our internal audits being posted. When this originally came out, I obviously didn't think much of it as far as in the past at how we had done things. And I think I sent this to the audit committee for review. I think Mr. Raymer's had some opinion on this. I did just have the other day a meeting with Wayne and Valerie Mays on this, and I've actually asked them for a couple pieces of feedback on that. What I can tell you is I'm sort of learning as we go on this, but I will say that Wayne has had some. I've given Wayne some questions that I think I need some answers. Obviously, any document we don't have a policy on this, and we've never had one in all the years that we've been doing internal audits. And I also want to commend during the same process, and I'm sure everybody got it right. Peter Minarski has done sort of a little bit of an evaluation of how we do it versus other communities. There's not a lot of communities that have internal auditors, by the way. I thought that was sort of an interesting find there. I would say we should have this ready to have a sort of a discussion finalized on this for next month. I've just got, obviously with the budget going on, there's only a certain amount of time in each day, but I am making progress on that. I will tell you that one of the suggestions that came to me, and I'm just putting it out there so everybody can digest this, and I'm looking for email traffic on this, by the way. Send me email traffic on any additional thoughts you have, is that any member can make a motion to post any document they want for a certain reason, but going forward. So just sort of an update on that. That didn't go away, I didn't forget about it, and there's been progress on that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't understand that. Could you repeat that point?
I believe that in the absence of us having a policy, which we don't, I believe any member could make a motion that they wanted something.
I'll make a motion.
Right, on a particular, if we had one in front of us tonight, I think any member could make a motion that that be posted for obvious reasons. It might have something to do with something they're interested. If we adopt a formal policy where we decide to do that one way or another, well, that would be different. But right now, we don't have a policy, but any member can make a motion to post it. I'm looking for Mr. Raymer,
I agree with that, Mr. Chairman. Any member could make a motion, and if seconded, it would be voted upon, and the outcome would be at the pleasure of the vote of the body. I agree with that. It's not what I thought you said the first time.
I'm sorry.
But I agree with the statement that any member has the right at new business here to make a motion for the posting, and it follows its due process course after that.
Okay, no, I'm thinking, that was something that wasn't, when that hit the board, I wasn't, that was sort of a new item. So I do have that going on. Budget law, HR.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Goldrick?
are you saying that you would like more information about this before having a fuller discussion by the full BET on this matter?
I am saying that I am right now, as you can see, gathering information, Mr. Minarski's project, comparables, what we do. I've had a meeting with the town attorney and assistant town attorney on this, and my suggestion is because the audit committee was, what was the vote on this in the audit committee, Mr.
2-2.
The vote in the audit committee was 2-2. So I would rather send it back to them with suggestions on what we do, have the committee review it, and then bring it back.
Mr. Chairman, you also assigned it to the Law Committee, and I don't
Correct.
think that the Law Committee has considered the item.
Right, and I don't think the law committee's gotten to it yet.
And to the embarrassment of the Law Committee, we did not consider it at our meeting last Thursday, although we should have. And I'm raising my right hand and swearing that at our next meeting, we will definitely consider the item.
Just don't schedule the Audit Committee, Law Committee after the Audit Committee, that's all.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, are you saying that next month, after the Law Committee has dealt with this, it will come before the full BET?
Correct, absolutely. As I said, I could tell you where I'm at right now, and there we go. Okay. Number 7, BET liaison reports. Do we have anything here?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to give a brief update on the Nathaniel Witherell.
Okay.
Actually, I'm sorry, that's under item 8, the Building Committee.
Okay. I don't see anything there. We'll move to item 8 then. Go right ahead.
Yeah, the original schedule for completion of Project Renew was August, September. And as a result of progress that had been made after we got the permit last year, the building permit, we had accelerated it to the end of June. However, we've encountered some areas of delay, one caused by the Department of Public Health, which rescheduled on 2 occasions the inspection for the 6 rooms, which prevented us from moving patients from one area to another so that we go on to the next phase. And that was finally completed actually 5 weeks after it was originally scheduled. And we're also having some difficulties with the electrical contractor who's understaffed and also showing some indications of financial constraints, so that we're back to our original schedule, which means that completion of the project is now scheduled for late August, early September.
Okay. Thank you. Central Firehouse is nothing. MISA, we have a MISA report with us that was circulated. And does everybody have one of those copies? Just checking. Okay. Item number 9, new business. Mr. Norton.
The Audit Committee at its meeting last Thursday voted 4-0 to appoint for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2014, McClattery to do the annual audit. This will be the 3rd year of a 5-year contract. The way in which the contract is structured is the first 2 years were included, and the next 3 years are individual renewals of the contract. But the committee voted 4-0 to retain McClattery to perform the fiscal 2014 audit. And I so move on behalf of the committee.
Okay, so we have an item moved by the committee. Discussion? I'm sorry.
Just point of clarification, just afterward, maybe uses as a segue into the second McGladrey item about the cost certification of Nathaniel Witherall.
I've shared that information.
I'm sorry?
I've shared that with the chair.
Is this your note here, Peter?
No, it's mine.
Oh, okay.
Is this the proper place? Or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Explain to the BET, the BET Audit Committee is responsible for hiring the external auditors, and we did an RFP about 3 years ago. It was a 2-year contract with 3 one-year options, and we're in the 3rd year. It's the first year of the option. The previous auditor, Bloom, was charging $135, and we got McGladrey for $115 in the first and second year, and then it went to $117 in the year that you're approving right now, after I stopped talking. And then it'll escalate to $121 and $124. The reason I brought it up was there was the issue of hiring the McGladrey to certify the cost for the historic tax credits for the Nathaniel Project Renew project. The included in the contract, beside the annual dollar amounts that they charge for the audit, they list a series of charges for the partner at $320, to the director for $210, to the manager at $180, to the supervisor for $130 and $115. The reason they give us these rates is if you ever want to hire them for additional services using these auditors, as opposed to the consultant wing, which we use for the payroll audit. I talked to the partner about an hour ago, and he said for the cost certification, he would give us a quote. He would give us a blended rate of $165 an hour. In other words, he's not going to charge 5 hours for the 320. He's going to blend everybody that goes into this. And he hasn't gotten a total response from the state of Connecticut as to the scope of the project, but his quote as of today is 40 to 80 hours with a minimum of $6,600 to $13,200, and he's pretty well assured that the cost should be under $10,000. So I don't know if you want to use this opportunity to assign that to the Project Renew or wait another month or so.
Mr. Chairman, the Audit Committee at its meeting last month, February meeting, voted 4-0 to make that recommendation.
Okay, so let's back up for a second. The item in front of us is the contract for McGladrey. Let me just comment so people don't get I don't want to get off the track. The reason that the item we postponed last month wasn't on the agenda for this month is because we didn't have that information when I built the agenda. So I would entertain a motion under new business if we wanted to go with that, but my point is that's why it's not on there. So the item before us right now is our regular contract with them, not Nathaniel Witherall's item. So so we're clear, that's all.
And FOI, Mr. Chairman, would permit you with a 2/3 vote to entertain an item that was not on the agenda, and if you would want to handle it that way, that would, I think, be permissible.
Thank you very much. So let's take the original contract first with McGladrey. Further discussion on the annual contract? Okay, all those in favor of the annual contract with McGladrey?
In favor.
In favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Raymer?
Since we're in new business, maybe this is a good moment for us to make a motion to approve the estimated charges as presented by McGladrey for the special audit as described by the controller.
I second that.
Item is moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. This is a motion to add an item to the agenda, not the merits of it.
Yes. As far as 2/3.
All those in favor of adding the item, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Abstaining. So that passed. So,
You're going to put the item back on the table. It comes from the Audit Committee who made that motion last month.
okay, so we have a cost estimate from when we postponed it. You're happy, this is our auditor, so, okay. So discussion, Mr. Finger.
Peter, I think when we talked about this at our last month's meeting, the sense that at least I was getting is that it might be $4,000 or $5,000. Now I'm hearing a number that's twice that. Is there any point in speaking to somebody else and getting a ballpark number from somebody else as to whether?
Nathaniel Witherall did that for me.
Okay,
I got a
thank you.
Anticipating your question.
I got a quote from Lloyd Bankston, Alan Brown, and Ray from O'Connor Davies. It's submitted by Vincent Rocco, who formerly did all the audit work over the years.
Right.
And actually, at the end is a quote for the same work for $10,000, and he references to additional work that may cost $1,500 or $1,000 or $3,000.
In addition
More.
to,
So he also gave a range of $10,000 to $13,000. So they're both in the ballpark. I personally think it's going to cost less because I think all they have to do is to examine invoices and verify in the finance department that the charges are applicable to Project Renew. So I did get another quote, which was slightly higher.
Further discussion on the, I'll call it the special audit for Nathaniel Witherell? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you, Peter. Item 9, the executive session, I actually have to ask that we postpone that. Peter Tessie is obviously the crucial person on that, and he's got some family issues going on. I do expect him back, and we may be able to get to it later. So with that said, what my thought was is we'd go to item 10 and ask the chiefs if they wanted to talk to us. Obviously, you know, the item going on with their budget submission. So if because I just don't have Peter here for that, so I would.
The chiefs here?
Rolly could go check. While we're on that, if we want, I can move to item 11. BET regular minutes for February 18th for approval. We can do minute approval.
That we approve the regular BET minutes from February 18, 2014.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Was everybody here?
you need a second?
Yeah.
I'll second.
Seconded by
Thank you,
Mr.
Bill.
Finger? I'm sorry, Bill.
All right.
Okay.
The minutes list 12 people in reference to the
Okay, good.
chair's question.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, the next item is our BET work session, February 20th. That was an easy set of minutes.
So I'll move the minutes of the BET budget work session of February 20th, 2014.
I'll second those.
Moved by Ms. Tarkington, seconded by Mr. Finger. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? God bless you.
That was a yes.
That was a yes vote. Are they here, Roland? Okay, good. Why we're here, I sort of have some of my, I sort of have some of the comments for the chairman's report. Let's see if I can run through this real quick. Our meeting, tomorrow night, we are 7 p.m. for the public hearing here. On Thursday night, decision night, the meeting was posted a while ago at 5 p.m. If there is a problem and we need to change that, we have plenty of time, we can do that. I just moved it up to 5 p.m. I wasn't really thinking about the caucuses there, but I leave it up to you. We can make that change tomorrow, but right now we are scheduled for 5 p.m. Leads me to another question. Do we want to be in this format or do we want a square?
This format is fine.
This is sort of tough, you know, on decision night, because we're calling it, and I've asked Roland to have the projector ready to go. Any thoughts on that either way?
Seems to have worked in the past.
Okay,
It also helps with microphones. Everybody's got their own
that's true.
microphone.
That is true. I didn't think of that. Okay. There's this attachment here for the committee and district meetings for April and May. Mr. Raymer, you drew the short straw with your committee assignments, and yeah, you're retired now, so I get you out a couple extra nights. But I have this.
Well,
If you
worse still, I have to go with Mr. Johnson.
well,
It'll be a pleasure.
you guys can argue that out. But my point is, if anybody can't make anything that's on here, I understand. We'll try to just communicate. We'll try to get coverage on the different meetings here.
This is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, this should help. The RTM directories I sent over to your caucus, so you should have that. Again, just, let us know. I'm going to forego the rest of my announcements and call up Chief Szynski.
You sign those when you please.
I will. Good evening, welcome, welcome. How was your vacation? You know, I was going to bring that up on my chairman's report. There's a lot of vacations going on around here. You know, we've got that Mr. Norton, that Mr. Johnson, that Ms. Weissler, Chief Szynski, First Selectman Tessie. I mean, you know, you're leaving us, and we're sitting here pounding out the work here, and you know.
The beauty of vacations are you've got competent people that stand in for you and get things done while you're away. And it's a warm feeling to know that that competence is there, and I'm sure everybody here shares the same opinion.
Well, that is true.
Yeah. I am.
Is that microphone on?
Does not appear to be.
Yes.
So, yes, I mean, at least you didn't send us drinks of a drink in a tiki bar from a Caribbean island like some people happen to do to me and say, wow, I hope you're enjoying the weather.
I am on Scottsdale time still. But
Oh, that's okay.
I want to say, you know you're getting old when the people you're playing golf with, the ice at the end of the round is being spent on shoulders and backs and knees rather than in glasses. I laughed heartily at them until I woke up on Friday morning and couldn't lift my arm past my waist, and I said, So, we survived.
So I think the reason we're here is I think since the Budget Committee, I think the Budget Committee this year sort of gave a very clear, here's our concerns, here's our issues. I was going to say this tomorrow night. Our budget process this year was a little bit shorter than in previous years. And I think, you know, the conversations with Chief Kick and yourself that, you know, we want to make sure we're taking the best look at what you're asking for and what the big picture may be. And so I added this to the agenda tonight. We do want to be home before Letterman. But
Jimmy Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon, there you go. But I leave it to you. It's you're up.
Okay. Based on some of the ad hoc meetings that we've been having, some of the conversations with many of you, both myself, Bob, Peter, Tessie, let's make it clear to start off with.
I'm not sure that microphone is on yet. And because it's being broadcast and things and taken.
It's on.
Got volume, Jeff?
Test.
Yep, I hear that one. Thank you, John.
How's that?
Better.
Better?
Thank you.
You hear me out there? So based on the ad hoc meetings that we've had and the discussions that we've had, make it clear, first of all, that we appreciate the time. These issues aren't easy issues to get our arms around. We've had these discussions for the years that I've been here, and they've certainly been going on prior to that. So I do appreciate the effort that new members, especially those on the Budget Committee, have made in understanding this. For those of you that have been around a couple of years, I think the curveball this year and the points that we want to explore deeper is where the shift from a 4-person model to a 3-person model took place. What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks on that? Because that can be kind of confusing for people as well. So the document that was sent out
We all have.
today was based on the last meeting that we had, which actually took place this morning, and some of the comments. What I wanted to do was first just get back to the basics, get back to where we were when we started this process. There were 2 identifiable concerns. All right, one was the staffing, in particular the reliance on 2-person engines that we still have in 3 stations, which was an identifiable concern, and the second being the lack of coverage in that northwest center and how to fill that gap. During the discussion, we touched on all of those points, anything from pension plans, volunteer utilization, neighboring communities, training protocols, water supply, construction options. We ran the gamut on dealing with that. And again, the call came out for, let's talk about the comprehensive plan. And My definition of comprehensive plan includes tackling those two issues. The staffing issue, specifically the concern of two-person engines, and how do we fill that void in the northwest section? And that's where we started on. So let me go over the budget items and then some of the details of how we got there and some of the concern. And we have here, obviously, Assistant Chief Kick, our Deputy Chief of Training, Sandy Kornberg of the Greenwich Volunteer Firefighters Association, John Pugney, Scott Hawkins, Sean Turpin of the district chiefs of their various companies, Matt Brooks, the Secretary of Local 1042, and Rich Yals, who is the Vice President of Local 1042. So you've got a combination of all aspects. So one of the things that has happened today is that we've certainly piqued the interest of everybody involved in a positive manner. So I'm going to go through the budget requests as they sit for the next 3 years and where we're planning on going based on discussions that we've had. And what we're down to in this year is the request for 8 new firefighters. And those 8 new firefighters were to be assigned 4 to the Byram Station, 4 to the Sound Beach Station, to increase the staffing levels of those particular stations to a 3-person station. Okay, and I'll get into the logic of that as we go through. So at the end of this year, your staffing model, without getting complicated, and I think Bob has sent out those charts as to who's where in the organization at the end of this year, is your Glenville Station, your North Street Station, and your Central Station Horseneck engine would still remain at four people. What's critical about specifically the Glenville and the North Street Station is that those are the 2 companies that converge to the northwest corner, along with Glenville Volunteers, Round Hill Volunteers. So that 4-person engine is critical at this point. Station at Horseneck, with engine 1 operating at 4 people, is still critical because with Central Station being constructed, we have that void in Central Greenwich where you've got a company coming up from Horseneck, but the truck company is still coming out of Coscob, so you don't have your usual response out of the Havemeyer corner right there. So that's the importance of a 4-person engine in engine 1. The concern is those 2-person engines that still respond out of Sound Beach, out of Byram. We put a tremendous effort into Byram through our recruitment retention coordinator, through some monetary incentives for volunteers in Byram to come up, and they're still struggling at this point. So the 2-person engine in Byram is a devastating concern for us at this point. The second point in this particular budget was the site acquisition or moving the Northwest Station forward, and that goes back to the availability of sites, how we're going to negotiate. I think, Bill Finger, not to put words in your mouth, I think you want to see that comprehensive plan before we move forward with the Northwest Station. So that second issue was in there. Wasn't necessarily tied to a funding issue at this point. It may be based on Peter Tessie's executive session coming in. Next year's budget is dependent on where we're going with the Northwest Station. If we're making significant progress with the Northwest Station, and that station is going to be built, once that station is built, the only staffing request that I see on the horizon for the next year with that Northwest Station and this 3-person model that we're trying to transition to is an additional 4 firefighters. And I'll go to, I use this map just because it's big. The remaining 4-person stations, the importance of that Glenville Station, the importance of the Northwest Station, and filling the void in the Northwest Station. Once that station is built, I drop North Street Station to 3. I drop Glenville till 3. Those 2 firefighters per shift go to the Northwest Station. The 4 new firefighters fill out a company of 3. And if you bear with me, I'll explain the logic of the 3-person companies as we move through this. So I think what's important to recognize is what we're saying here is there is not a possible way that as fire chief I can come in and tell you you're going to get to four-person engines in all of your existing stations and achieve coverage in the northwest corridor. Then you're talking about that number of firefighters that exceeds really what the town should be doing. We're giving you a plan which includes this budget year that allows you to make progress on two fronts. And oddly enough, those two fronts are moving forward with the design and development of the Northwest Station and improving the safety of those two-person engines by increasing the available firefighting force by a third on paper, but realistically, the actual firefighting hands doubles from one person to two-person in those two companies. So by these 8 people, you're starting to make the progress to transition this entire town into a 3-person model. The additional benefit of going to the 3-person model, other than the immediate increase for those 2-person engines, is you also give our volunteer contingent time, which, if I heard them correctly and they're here, so you can certainly ask them, is what they need to develop additional resources, whether it's going to be a spot fill-in for shift work or other opportunities. It buys them some time, and it also gets us to the point where if we go to a 3-person model, there's only a necessity to get one person, whether it be a volunteer firefighter or a deputy chief who's responding to a major fire, one person to the scene to fill out that 4-person response engine. So if it's Sean Turpin responding to his house to meet up with a 3-person engine from Sound Beach, boom, I've got that 4th-person in place. All through the 3 years that I put in there, there's no additional staff other than the potential of those 4 firefighters to go in. So that's the budget aspect that's laid out in these pages. You know, what do you need to do, or what are the potential in the out years of those first 3 years? Got to evaluate if you're comfortable with those 3-person engines. You know, we had a very successful experiment, if you will, in Glenville, from the 2-person engine as a stopgap measure while we discussed the Northwest Station. We had a very successful experiment in Glenville going from a 2-person to a 4-person engine. We came before you and we said, listen, our 4-person engine is going to reduce multiple engine responses across town. It did. And we documented that on a quarterly basis for the BET, and those reports are available. It reduced multiple engine responses. It reduced injuries to firefighters. You don't see the effect of a 2-person engine. Some will say that a 2-person engine plan has been in effect for years. What you don't see, and you're starting to see it in wear and tear of operations and apparatus, but you don't see the effect of injuries on the fire ground with a 2-person engine. And Bob has documented that, you know, multiple 300% increase in injuries to firefighters that are operating in a 2-person engine. Right? We reduced those injuries in a 4-person Glenville experiment, as they have in the other 4-person injuries that have gone down as well. We said that we'd increase efficiency with that 4-person engine company out there. We have. There's multiple calls that they have been on as a 4-person company that they have impacted life safety and minimized property damage, preserved property, because they were able to get there quickly and start work. So that experiment was so successful, now we come in and we say, we want to go to a 3-person model. He lost his rocker. And I can tell you, I'm pushing 60. I've been in this business for 40-something years. I don't scare easily. I don't get excited easily. At fire scenes, I don't panic. But through this budget process, I've had both a feeling, I won't call it that I'm scared, I will say that I'm nervous, and I also have a level of excitement. And there's the 2 reasons for that. because you're on the cusp of making some great headway. I could talk about the benefit of that fire training facility and the relationship that's going to sprout between career and volunteer firefighters, because I've seen it happen. I've told stories this morning of instances where it's happened. It's a no-brainer for me because I've seen it. But here's my nervousness and here's my excitement. My nervousness stems back to that video clip on that Church Street fire, with that one fire officer in front of that building, and what could have been. And in 1982, going back to February 23rd, I was part of 2 firefighters that died in a building collapse. It should never have happened. None of us want to relive anything to do with injuries or death on that magnitude. And here's why I'm nervous. The 2-person model doesn't work. The injuries alone cause it problems. On a national basis, the National Institute of Safety and Training has actually recognized that they don't even quantify 2-person engines. They can't fulfill the steps that are taken to effectively operate on the fire ground. So my concern and my nervousness is that we're rolling the dice with 2-person engines. And every year that goes by, we continue to roll those dice. And I'm concerned about that. I am nervous about that. I legitimately have built good relations with these men. And I think everyone is concerned for the safety of people responding in ill-staffed engine companies. So that's my nervousness. And that, believe me, it causes me to be nervous for a reason. But my excitement stems from, with this 3-person model, if we can get to it, it actually makes progress into this northwest area here. To sign on a site, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but what you can come out of in this budget year is progress on all these fronts. So color me a circle somewhere in the northwest area. I've got northwest coverage. I've got coverage in the downtown area. Leaves me a swath in the center where somebody might say, who was it last year? Might have been Pellegrino, who said, hey, my house isn't in a circle.
We got rid of him. No, just joking.
But my house isn't in a circle. But look where it puts us. It puts us in position where you do have stations out there, and your northwest corridors are pretty sound, and you would be a community that would be looking at 3-person staffing, which, based on the information I think that was sent to Mr. Raymer over the past couple of weeks, is consistent with what most of the communities across the state are running, a 3-person engine, an increase in safety, and it gives you the ability to get anywhere in the town of Greenwich with a pincer-type fire attack and rescue mode, probably in 7 minutes, 8 minutes top, depending on weather conditions or traffic. And that's anywhere in the town of Greenwich. And that's exciting for me. That's exciting because I don't have a hole out there. Through no fault of the people who live up there, you patch that hole in fire protection up there. You know, the 3-person model running across the state still does not meet your 2 in and 2 out regulation. All right, let's make it clear the difference that we started the year about, what a recommendation is and what an actual codified state requirement is. All right, 4-person staffing is a National Fire Protection Association recommendation, not codified by state statute. It's a consensus standard. It's what the experts in the field recognize as the optimum staffing level for an engine. What's codified in the state of Connecticut is the 2 in, 2 out regulation. A 3-person engine company does not meet your 2 in and 2 out codified state regulation. So what does it do for you? What does it do for me? It gives me a second person on that hose line that responds initially. It's not a volunteer or a career issue. It's just who pulls up to that fire building when, and how many hands do they have to drag that hose to effect a rescue. And what a 2-person engine company does, it now gives me 2 people to fill out that tactical exercise. Let me tell you how that's important. And there are guys in here that are much younger than I that are still fighting fires, but if I can pull a hose line as I'm going in with that second firefighter, and I have occupants in this part of the building and a fire blazing over here, and not only am I going to be able to effect the rescue, but I can put a hose line for protection between the fire and what I'm trying to protect, whether it be life or property. That's a significant impact to strategy and tactics, and it has a positive effect on life safety. 2 people to do that. Right now, I legitimately have 1. Al, stand up for a second. Look at the size of that guy. 1 guy coming in is going to pull me out of the 3rd floor of the building. Richie could do that, though.
I could have the whole back row stand up and they
Still wouldn't be able to drag them out.
But you know, and those two people on that engine company affect life safety. It means a difference. Just recently, we had that ice rescue. We talked about the ice rescue. Wonderful rescue where the 2 kids were pulled off of the ice. And what happens to the second individual of that 2-person company when he's hauling the victim and the firefighter rescuer off the ice? He's injured because why? Right? Big difference in a 3-person company. Right? Big difference for health and safety. I got a ton of other points on here that I wanted to touch on because I just wanted you to understand, I guess the final point on this 8 firefighter request is whether you buy into this 4-person model and experiment that you wanted to do. If you decided after executive session on this piece of property or discussion with Peter Tessie that the Northwest Station is off the table, if you don't buy into the fact that even by running the statistical information, I think Bob has proven that Station 9 is going to have the same amount of calls as Station 8 has in Northeast Greenwich. If you don't buy into that and say, no, these people knew what they were getting into when they bought that property. Every day I get a phone call. There was one at 5 o'clock from someone on Bedford Road who said, my insurance is going up $1,000 because they say I don't have adequate fire protection. Okay, we'll continue to get those calls. These people know what they have. But even if you decide not to address the hole in fire protection in Northwest Greenwich, which I do not advocate because you have the ability here in this budget season to take care of that. If you didn't do that and you shifted to Mike's concept of making sure we have 4-person engines through the rest of the town, you're still going to need those 8 firefighters. Those 8 firefighters will still be needed. So what I'm asking you through this budget process is to just rationalize with yourself and say, if I'm going to need those 8 people while we have a training facility, we increase our participation, and I can move forward on the Northwest concept, and I have a plan that I know even with the Northwest concept, I can have adequate fire protection with this 3-person model. Is it the cat's butt, 4-person staffing across town? No, it's not. It's a model that's used across the state. It will save you some multiple engine responses. I'll be honest with you, not as many as the 4-person experiment in Glenville, but you will save some multiple engine responses. You will have a saving on injuries with a 3-person model just by virtue of the fact that you're doubling the activity with that single firefighter. So you are going to reduce injuries. You are going to save on some wear and tear. You're going to put pressure on the entire system to generate that 4th person from somewhere, whether it's a volunteer that responds quickly from home to the scene, whether it's using the deputy chief as a 4th person in the 2 in and 2 out, which he's a commander, incident commander, not really a recommended practice, but he could be the 4th person. You put pressure on the system to still get that 4th person there. We've had a 2-person model across town. I think at one meeting we ran the historical staffing levels of the fire department going back into the 70s, I believe. So you've had a transition in this town of staffing going from total volunteers to paid drivers to then that 2nd firefighter that was added to the system. And you've remained with that 2-person staffing model for an awful long time. right? There isn't a desire, I'll let, you can ask the questions of our volunteer contingent, but there has not been in the past a desire for volunteers to completely work the shifts that are available. Because as Frank Napolitano said in his presentation, we have jobs, we have families. Think about what you'd be asking them to do at this point. You'd be asking them, if we had 3 engines that were running 2-person engine companies and you wanted to get them to a 3rd person or a 4-person, think how many bodies that is through the course of the week, spread across 80 entry tagged responders. That's a tremendous time commitment to ask of people who are volunteers. And it's really not a standard practice in Connecticut, maybe in some college towns it is. And I'll touch on one last aspect, because some of you are probably asking, in the COSCOB vicinity, certainly Chief Putney had asked, when do I get my 3rd person
That's,
on Engine 2? Engine 2 at least has a 5-person station at this point. While Central Station is being constructed, the aerial truck company with 3 people is operating with a 2-person engine company. Right? Not the ideal situation, calling it a 5-person station, because they do respond that engine on calls by themselves. I am reluctant to drop the 4th person from Engine 1, which responds out of Horseneck, while Havemeyer is under construction in here. But the ultimate plan would be, the Northwest Station is built, 1 person from Northeast Greenwich, 1 person from Glenville. The hired 4 people gets you 3 people there. With the 8 people that hopefully will sanction in this budget year, I've taken care of Byram, I've taken care of Sound Beach. Central Station is complete. Engine 1, the truck company go back with the volunteer companies into Central Station. Engine 1 becomes a 3-person engine, and that 4th person comes down to COSCOB as the 3rd person. What's the dangers that you need to look at? Now, this isn't a plan that makes everybody happy. I want you to know that. If I was a fire chief, I'd love to have 4 people in every station. I'm just telling you, you cannot accomplish that with the Northwest Station, and for me, be fiscally responsible. I'm sure the local has a concern of 4-person engines, and certainly wants to increase safety on their level of all aspects. So I don't think that because we come up with a plan, everybody's going to buy into that plan. And my saying that I've told you for years is, any decision that you make, the best you can hope for is 51%, 49%, and hopefully you're on 51%. I like to say I give out $10 bills on payday on Friday. 50% of the people, 51% will say thank you, 49% will say should have been a 20. It's the nature of the beast. These are good people that we have in this fire department. Volunteer and career firefighters. They're looking to preserve their safety. They want to go home to their wives and children, and it's up to us to make sure that happens. And we're going to do our best to make sure that happens. Things that you have to look out for. You need to be able to control your destiny. There's been some discussion as to, do we need all these stations, these circles across the map? Can you get by with 5 stations in the process? And I think my boss has made it very clear that these districts in the town of Greenwich are core pieces of the town of Greenwich. Right? Always have been. Fire service across the country, that fire station has been in the hub of the community. Still is. Right? And these guys do it from the COSCOB Winter Festival to the actions that take place in Glenville over the years to everything that goes on down Sound Beach. You know that they are the hub. This plan keeps everybody operating. Right? What you'll need to be conscious of in the future, to be perfectly honest and upfront with you, is you've got to keep a handle on potential unfunded mandates that come out of the state, on the state level. There's no doubt that 4-person engine companies have been shown to be the most efficient and optimal. If there's a move that gains any traction, and now you get an unfunded mandate coming out of federal OSHA or town OSHA for 4-person staffing, you're going to need to make some decisions as to what's going to happen at that point. Do I see it coming down the pike in the next 5 years and 10 years? No. But I can tell you, even if down the road that there is some mechanism that forces you to consider consolidation of companies because of a four-person mandate. There are two areas, three, that I'm telling you are going to remain. And at any point, that Northeast Station will be one of the remaining stations. The Northwest Station will be key. Central Station will be key. And after that, if you come down to two or whatever happens with consolidation, if and when it ever happens, and I don't see it coming, you'll still have good coverage throughout your town in a pincer-type movement. You need to be conscious of that moving forward. Some of the topics that we've talked about, I just want to touch on them because, you know, we can get passionate about pensions, and I think moving forward, both the chairman and Mr. Raymer and ourselves, we talked, there's got to be some clarity of the discussions about the benefits and the disadvantages, both financially and operationally, of the defined contribution plan. What are the savings as they look forward? I think Mike used a racetrack scenario. We have a defined benefit plan out there. Just what are the benefits of the defined contribution plan as far as costs go? And is there really a great deal of savings when you add in what needs to be part of the component to make a benefit package? The volunteer company participation, commingling, training, and relationship building, you know, it started. I mean, it's been continuous, and I'll say this tongue-in-cheek, but it's a concern. You know, you don't run a public safety department on whispers, okay? So we have a staff meeting on a monthly basis, and in any organization, I have paid officers and paid firefighters that don't necessarily agree with the administration concept. We also have volunteer firefighters and volunteer officers that don't agree with things as well. So you're going to get that in the organization. I respect opinions, honestly, every opinion that comes through, but in the end, we can't run the fire department by committee. So we do our best. The volunteers, I hope that they have heard over and over, are an integral part of this organization, and they will be forever. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be part of it. Local 1042 is going to be part of this organization. So you will see an improvement, and that improvement has already started, but the training facility is going to make things happen. The ability of people to establish face-to-face contact off of the fire ground brings familiarization and confidence with each other, and you'll see increased mentoring going on between career and volunteer firefighters. And if it doesn't, you can come and you can beat me up all you want, because I'm confident in that. The fire training facility did make good progress this month after some construction issues. We touched on the dual response cost. Some things that get brought up are mutual aid and relying on our neighbors as we go through, and that topic had been brought up as well. We do have mutual aid, as you're all aware of, and it varies in degree. Mutual aid is not a replacement for a lack of services. So we have to be very conscious of that. When Stamford actually is still continuing to go through their difficulties in relationships and providing fire protection, there was a point that I did have to have a chat with our people, because Stamford was relying on us very heavily, and the town of Greenwich was not going to supplement a deficiency in Stamford's response because they were having an internal debate. So we have to maintain that concern. But we do, from a mutual aid response pattern, rely heavily with Stamford to and from. Banksville certainly as a company here, but we have gone into New York State more frequently recently. Our monk, again, as Bob has probably told you, wants to participate as a mutual aid partner. They're not interested, or have not been interested, in an automatic aid partnership. We can continue to explore automatic aid, but even with automatic aid, you're still going to have that delay of initial response, which is not going to help the Northwest Quadrant. You might remember from our Rye Brook exercise when Glenville was being built, we tried to relocate career firefighters to the Rye Brook station. Rather than put the trailer and go through the expense of that, we had Rye Brook right across from Dan Warzo's house on King Street. And many of you probably don't realize what nixed that plan, because Rye Brook was thoroughly in favor of it. What nixed that plan actually was the tax implications of what was going on, that any firefighter that worked and responded out of Rye Brook was going to be required to pay payroll taxes, and there was actually a discussion that took place on the governor's level trying to say this is ridiculous, because can you imagine out of 100 responding paid firefighters that might have cycled through the Rye Brook Firehouse, they'd all have to be filing New York State income taxes because of payroll issues. So as strange as it seems, and I've seen this with Danbury and Brewster, the yellow line going across King Street might as well be the wall of China sometimes, I feel, with responses and interstate cooperation. Large-scale events, not a problem. But I sometimes get concerned that if Dan Warzola, God forbid, and please, had an issue at his house, if Rye Brook would be notified across the line and how that would work. And that's something that we have to continue to work on, because just recently has Portchester and the city of Rye actually started to participate in mutual aid as well. So we're going to have to continue to develop that with a conscious fact that we're not going to replace anyone's services out there. Water supply and planning and zoning issues, we've started the dialogue. We have steep funds for the remainder of 2015 for dry hydrants and cisterns that are out there. We're talking with P&Z and Law Department as to the legal ramifications if we can somehow firm up some requirements in construction for larger facilities that are out there. And that, I think I'm just about through with the points. I just want to close up, and again, two basic issues. The two-person staffing, making progress in the northwest quadrant. You can do that. You know, it's not the ideal system, but you're given an opportunity here. You're given an opportunity to make progress on both fronts. If you walk away from the 8 people, you're doing two things. You're shutting the door on, I won't say you're shutting the door on the Northwest Station, because you can go forward with that, but you're prolonging the two-person engine companies. But I think we're giving you a fiscally responsible plan that isn't pie in the sky of a 4-person engine, but it's going to definitely impact health and safety for not only our firefighters, but it's going to impact health and safety for the community as well. And that's what we're trying to do in its simplest form. I thank you for listening to my diatribe and running over, and if I've confused you more than when I started, we got plenty of people here that try and help out.
Chief, let me just start with a few, so we're very clear. So I didn't hear you talk much about time in district with our current dual response, and I know we had touched on that, but before we go further, I just want to make sure I understand numbers. So the budget we're working on Thursday night that we're making decisions on, we call that fiscal 15, the second number in the budget. So we call that fiscal 15 and so on. So in fiscal 15, regardless of a Northwest Station or not, you're asking for eight career firefighters. And I know there's been conversations about maybe a floater or something down, but just the core of the issue is you're asking for 8 in fiscal 15. In fiscal 16, you're asking for 4, and that gives you the ability to deliver with some transfer of coverage 3 everywhere, and 3 with that would include the Northwest Station.
I'm not looking for the 4 in 16 unless we're ready to go
Okay.
to the Northwest Station.
Okay.
If you want to come through and say, let's expedite
COSCOP.
COSCOP coverage, we're going to give you 4 people, I'll welcome them.
Okay, so let's do it that way then. Let's just say that Northwest isn't built or something. So the 4 you would apply that to COSCOP, so you'd have your 3, forget Central, we know what that is, 3, and 3. Okay. So fiscal 17 rolls along, Firehouse isn't built. No request. Firehouse is built because we did COSCOP earlier. You need 4 more to create that. That math doesn't seem to work for me because so we know we need four human beings to cover one shift. So if I'm just trying to understand that. So if you got the fiscal 17 and COSCOP's done and you hired 4, you need 12 to put 3 at that station.
Correct. Taking 1 out of Station 8, you're taking 1 out of Glenville, and you're going to take 1 out of Engine 1. 1 person.
But that's still 7.
3 people. How do you 7?
Well, if you ask for 4, you take out 1, 2, and 3. 4 and 3 is 7.
You're
That's
giving me 8, which covers the Byram Station, covers Sound Beach, 4 on each crew.
One position
Your
is
multi-
shift, so you take 4 people out of here, 4 people out of there.
Your multiple is 4 for every position.
there you go. Now the math works. So your step 1 has nothing to do with the Northwest Station. Your step 2 is predicated on where you are on the road at that point in time, whether your Central's completed, Central Firehouse, that project is completed, or you do Costco. So that Northwest location still comes down to, you can't plan for it unless you have it. You can't plan for it unless you have it, but if you did have it, you have a plan for that. So, okay.
This is slightly cheaper, I think. It's a slightly cheaper alternative, of course. We could do the 8 people now, which would give you the 3rd person in Byram and the 3rd person in Sound Beach. You presently have a 4-man staff at Horseneck. You've got 4 people at Glenville, and you've got 4 people at North Street. Coscob would remain a 2-person station.
2-person engine.
A 2-person engine. But while Central is closed, while you're dealing with Horseneck, I've got Ladder 1 with a crew of 3 there. In the passage, so for the moment, 8 people gives you a 3-person model with the extra person at the 2 stations that are looking at Northwest. I've got an extra person at Central, but I still have a 2-person station at Coscob. At any point that you wanted to, you could make the strategy decision of having a 3-person engine at Central, and you then have a 3-person engine in Coscob as well. As you open Northwest, if that's what's going to happen, you then pull the 4th person off of North Street, the 4th person off of Glenville. You don't need 4-person engines any longer because now your Northwest quadrant is being covered by your brand new station in Northwest. And you either have to be satisfied with that 3-person model and be left with just 2 in Coscob, or you're going to need to hire just 1 more person. It means 4 shifts, 4 people, but it's 1 operative firefighter on each shift to fill in the 1 that you're missing for either in Northwest or for your 3rd person in Coscob. Or if you're looking for a fly person to be filling in the 4th person, that still is 1 more additional set of hires. But our aspiration, you can imagine, is to develop the cooperation from the volunteers, so I don't need to be doing a career person on the 4th person. I have capable responding volunteers that are filling in that 4th occasion on every place that I need them. So the 8-person hire you're looking for, that 8-person hire is addressing the 2-person model. It has nothing whatever to do with whether we are or not in the future doing a Northwest, correct?
I'd like to say that if you're buying into the 2-person model, it's going to be across town, but you are correct. The 8 people are needed regardless of whether you take action in the Northwest.
You're looking for 8 people, whether you're doing Northwest or not, because you're addressing your dissatisfaction with the 2-person model.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson?
So, Chief, I'm still confused. 5 years out, if there's a Northwest Fire Station, how many incremental hires are there from today?
Total new hires, 5 years out, going into this 3-person staffing model, including the 8 this year, you'd need 4 more bodies. So you need a total of 12 new hires as we stand here today, 5 years out.
What about elevating whatever number of captains you need and then backfilling the lieutenants and on down?
I wouldn't be backfilling lieutenants. I didn't include items like the upgrades to captains because it's an ancillary issue of $88,000 over the years. I didn't include things like the communications/IT person that we're discussing as administrative staff, because you're talking about 1Z, 2Z type issues. You're not talking about major firefighting staffing things.
Well, yeah, but you're maybe minimizing, at least what I'm trying to figure out, you got four new captains, let's just say. They're going to come out of the lieutenant's ranks, so you're going to have to get new lieutenants. And then they're going to come out of the firefighter force, aren't they?
The captains,
As you keep-
but it's just a change in responsibility and titles. You're not adding bodies to the table of organization. You're changing the rank structure.
Okay, but it affects salaries and overtime.
That will affect salaries, and you can bet that those captains will be senior lieutenants or lieutenants who are currently involved in the defined benefit plan, so there will be some legacy costs associated with those upgrades.
If I may, I've got another question. Last we spoke at some of the budget hearings about efforts to get better, more meaningful participation for the volunteers. Has anything happened over the last several weeks?
Yeah, I mean,
since
I'll let Bob and the volunteers comment on that. While I was out in Scottsdale, based on some of the comments that were made, some fact, some fiction, these guys have met, so.
I'll let Sandy speak. I mean, you've heard from me for the last 2 weeks since the chief has been gone. I want you to hear it from the volunteers themselves. If you're
Well,
fine with that.
it's your choice. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you could.
So you don't take my word for it.
Never did.
Hello, Sandy. Good.
Maybe just to put this into some context, from the last meeting that we had with the BET when Frank Napolitano was here, we've had a number of meetings with the Volunteer Association, and it has been decided that through that association, my fellow colleagues over here, Chief Pugney, Chief Turpin, Frank Napolitano, and I would be representing the association at all follow-up meetings, which we've had. The intent of our conversations, and I'll come to the meetings in just a moment, but the intent of our conversations has been our goal is to bring as much harmony as we possibly can between the fire administration, the union, and the volunteer force. The situation with regard to the hiring of additional staff is really not our concern. I mean, we have no decision in that terms, that fiscal responsibility. But what it did do was to allow us on that particular topic, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but what we wanted to be able to do at this particular juncture, because this juncture has not come up for a very long time, was to try to be able to determine how the volunteer force would best be integrated into the overall fire administration activities. And it's with that in mind that we have had several follow-up meetings with the fire administration, with Assistant Chief Kick and Deputy Chief Roberts. We have had what has turned out to be a very positive and very productive exchange between us with regard to our ability to express with total transparency and with total candor and frankness all of our concerns. And the net result of that has been an ability to open up a totally new dialogue in terms of how we would be integrated. We had talked to Bob and to Larry the other day, and we ended up with a number of initiatives which Bob has put in writing as a first start to this effort. Subsequent to that, we had a meeting with the volunteers last week, which was certainly an interesting exchange, some positives, some negatives, but the purpose of that was to make sure that all of the volunteers, all the district chiefs and all of the presidents knew exactly what we were doing, excuse me, and for them to be able to take that message back to their respective fire companies. As a result of that, we have talked further with Bob and Larry, and we have decided that we thought in the best interest of everybody in terms of a win-win situation with regard to fire administration, the union, and the volunteers, that as we move forward, it would be in everybody's best interest for us to prepare a memorandum of understanding, which could be discussed, again, in candor with the fire administration and with the union, for us to then, once a decision had been made, a consolidated point of view had been made, for us to be able to take this back to our respective fire companies, to get an understanding and an approval from them, and then to be able to go back to the fire administration and the union to say, this is where we sit, this is our consolidated point of view, we have all agreed to this, and we'd like to then be able to come back to the BET with this this memorandum of understanding.
Great.
So that's where we are right now. Our goal is, just to reemphasize, is to try to be able to bring everybody together. Not that that's our capability, but it's our wish to be able to bring as much harmony, as understanding, and cooperation and unity within the fire services to serve the town of Greenwich in terms of safety, the safety that we can all bring to bear. So we believe, in essence, in summary, that we have made, I think, a lot of progress. And we're happy with that because it's the first time I've been involved in this now for 14 years, and it's the first time that I've seen something like this happen, and we don't want to lose this momentum. We're trying to pave a very positive path to the future. Just one more point. There's always conversation amongst the different entities with regard to could this have been done better, was this wrong, was this right, and so on and so forth. What we're trying to do is to simply take a look at the history and learn from that history and bring that history up to a point, but not to drag that negative history into the future. We're trying to learn from it, take advantage of it, and move on to a more positive path.
So one could say then that, this is great news, that at least there's more talk and dialogue.
Yes.
One could say that rather than increasing fire staff now, we wait during this year, see what type of progress is made and how much more participation is there for the volunteers. Rather than going ahead and staffing 8 firefighters right now, maybe we could see how this all comes to fruition.
I cannot speak, I would not be able to speak on behalf of all the volunteer fire companies because we've not had this conversation with them. But I would like to just make one point that was made earlier, and that is that we have a responsibility also, and that is the responsibility to be able to bring volunteers to various incidences as they occur. And that is something which I think every single fire company is emphasizing with a lot of very strong emphasis that we need to turn out. I'll give you an example. We had last Wednesday night, there were 4 calls, and we ended up with 9 men showing up, 9 volunteers showing up. We didn't have enough room for them. So we had some stay at the station, some went to the calls. So it's going to be a progression of experience in being able to get the volunteers to show up. And it's been very positive, at least in my experience, over the past months. I'm not sure that with regard to mentioning anything or saying anything in terms of an opinion about the 8 or 9 career staff, that it's not within my purview to do that.
Yeah. But at least it again, from my personal opinion, shows some progress. Perhaps there is going to be better cooperation. If there isn't, then maybe we do. A year from now, have to seriously consider adding fire staff for better coverage. If there's some areas in town that are deficient from a volunteer standpoint, but it sounds like there's a little more interest. It'll certainly help your recruitment if you can have more meaningful relationships there.
For sure, without a doubt.
Mr. Finger?
Sandy, you mentioned the memorandum of understanding. Can you give me an idea of how long you think it'll take before you come up with that and go back and review it with the other?
I can comment on that.
Okay.
We agree in principle, and we have exchanged documents. We're just going to basically reduce those ideas to a memorandum of understanding, and then develop it together and reduce it to a memorandum of understanding. So there's training involved.
Right, mentoring.
A mentoring program.
With another possibility of having somebody interfacing at a higher level with the fire administration.
We're talking about
volunteers.
2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months?
There's no reason why we can't do something in the next 2 days.
I'm not looking to hold you to it, I'm just getting an idea.
30 days, I think, in principle, we have the 5 points. We agree on, there's a couple other points that Sandy was
There's
going
some
to send to
others.
me for discussion, but I don't understand why we wouldn't be able to complete something in 60 days.
Mike, if I...
Go ahead.
I'd like to ask the chief a question.
Certainly.
Thank you, Sandy. Did that answer your question, Mark?
Yes.
Sandy's,
Yep.
you've all heard from me for the last 2 weeks, so.
Thanks, Andy. Chief, if you were put on the spot, which I will be doing, and asking, what is your if you had to prioritize between Northwest and going to 3-man engines as you're proposing right now, what is your top priority for firefighting in Greenwich as a whole? Again, I know they're both important, but in terms of if you had to rank the priority, and again, I'm not saying one has something to do with aid and the other doesn't. Just asking I think a simple question.
Yeah, my priority would be to start to attempt to fix these two-person engines. And I base that on 2 things. The life safety concern of the companies that are with 2 firefighters in the station now. And Byram, as much as I love John Thompson, they just don't have the activity there at this point. And I have 4-person engines that are responding into backcountry. We've had this discussion before. While the coverage is nothing as far as the time response, at least when an engine gets there, they can go to work at that point. So my priority would be get me these 8 people, regardless of what happens in the Northwest. That process is going to continue, but let's start to make some progress in Byram, in Sound Beach. You've got District Chief Scott Hawkins from Sound Beach here. Maybe he'd like to weigh in. And then I know with the opening of Central Station, which hopefully will have a groundbreaking soon, I can get that 3rd person into Coscop when that station goes through. So my priority is the 2-person engine. So, Mark, to your question, I understand what you're conceptually thinking. Understand it as the fire chief where I'm thinking. The increase in response of volunteer companies is great. It's phenomenal. It's going to continue to grow. My concern is that initial response. I don't want to put a firefighter in Byram, in Sound Beach, in a position where they are going into a burning building and the cavalry is still coming. I don't want to put that one person in a position where he's going to be seriously hurt. That's my concern.
So is response time then an issue?
Well, what is the issue is the initial response with the 2 people, right?
But when does a second truck arrive that you can then go into the fire?
Correct.
But is that an issue with Sound Beach, let's just say? I didn't get the idea there was a response time issue in Sound Beach.
Well, you don't have volunteer firefighters responding out with engines the majority of the time that they're there. Will they come to the scene? Yes, but the initial response, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I want to say this, the concern, Scott, is the initial response. Who gets on scene first and is expected to take action?
But I'm also talking about career. I mean, if a 2-man truck from Coscop can also make it within your 8-minute time response frame, isn't that still satisfying what we need to do?
And we'll have this discussion in more detail. But in a fire situation, fires grow exponentially in minutes. If you're talking even an 8-minute response time for cavalry to get there, the impact on the structural integrity of the building is one thing to consider. Certainly, if there were occupants in there that we weren't able to get there is another issue. The immediate concern is to improve the capability of that 2-person response to a 3rd person that can assist both in life safety and perhaps get a line to protect property preservation and protect the occupants while that rescue is being effected. It's that initial, I'm driving out the door with a driver and 1 person in the front seat, and I pull up to the event. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Raymer.
I'm concerned with the question that my colleague, Mr. Johnson, has raised, that if I understood Mr. Johnson correctly, his thought was that maybe the volunteer response can be developed to a point that it's a substitute for having the third-person response. And so I think it needs to be responded to, maybe even best by Sandy, to indicate whether or not it's a reasonable expectation for Mr. Johnson to be hoping or planning that if I am able to be successful in developing the volunteer response, I may not need to hire more people to have a three-person response on the engines. And I don't want to be giving that response, but I think one of you needs to give the response. And I think most particularly for the volunteers to be indicating whether or not they view their role as becoming the third person, making their participation into a three-person engine. And I think that should be responded to.
Scott, if you don't mind, Scott Hawkins is the district chief of Sound Beach.
Chief, could I ask you a question specifically in that area? Adding 8 additional firefighters, what is the time frame in which they are qualified to respond to the incidents?
In this budget year, those firefighters would not be hired as it is now until after January of 2015. By the time they complete the academy and they're ready to be assigned, will probably be June of 2015.
So we're talking about being able to perform the duties in fiscal 16.
A lag time of about a year, budget-wise for us.
Yeah.
So in responding to Mark Johnson's question, I mean, you're going to still have a year time frame in which you don't have the use of any additional firefighters under your proposal here.
And that was a budgetary decision that was made before we even got to you. It was covered.
But if we have qualified volunteers who could fill that vacancy during the period of time, I think that's the point in which
Well, I
it's being made.
understand the point that Mark is making, and I don't want to speak for the volunteers. I'll let them speak for themselves, because we've been down this road before, but I think that's important for you guys to hear.
Hello.
Hello there, good evening.
How are you? I've been a volunteer in the town of Greenwich for 28 years. I started in Old Greenwich. I moved to Glenville, and I am back in Old Greenwich. This is an ongoing discussion that we've been having for the past couple weeks. Fortunate part for me is I also work in Old Greenwich. It's hard for me to get out of work during the day. I've spoken with Bob. I've also spoken to my company, because we have, fortunately for us, we have had our meeting on last Thursday. So whereas the other companies have not brought this to their companies and spoke about it, we had a very lengthy conversation. The issue is the initial response, and I cannot guarantee a person on that engine, whether it be a third person or a fourth person, in the initial response to an incident. And that's the issue at hand. You know, can I get guys to my firehouse? Yes. Can they get another truck? Possibly. It's hard during the day, but I cannot guarantee on the initial response people to be that third man or fourth man on the engine. That's just how life is, unfortunately.
Mr. Chairman.
That's an answer to a question. Mr. Goldrick.
Hi. I'm curious, around us in Port Chester, Banksville, Darien, New Canaan, several places in Westchester, I understand it's entirely volunteer. And there was some talk during the budget hearings a couple of weeks ago about perhaps having living quarters, and that there were ways to make it for the volunteers so that they would be more there reliably and could be more integrated on a regular basis. Is that, with the scores of qualified volunteers we have today, not going to happen, or is that something that we can implement going forward?
I'll let Chief Turpin take that.
Sean Turpin, I know most of you. I've been with the fire service about 20 years. Excuse me, district chief in the Central right now. With the current system we operate, with the 94 white tag members we have, we've been through the tag system. It's not, we don't have the manpower to do what you're asking to do on a full-time basis, to provide that staff 24/7, you want to say, that third person or even the fourth person. The model that we operate now, where we either go to the firehouse or go to a scene. We've been looking at other options to address your option of doing some type of shift program. I know at Glenville, Sandy and those guys have a little program they run where they may be down at the firehouse for 6 or 7 hours on a Thursday, but they're not guaranteed they're going to be there every Thursday. Now, can we move how we operate into something like that, or another option of how we can do both? We've been talking about that and looking at those options, but that's not going to happen overnight either. That's going to take much longer than hiring the 8 guys that the chief's looking for. I mean, that would probably take 2, 3, 4 years of progression to get additional volunteers that would do shifts. The reason we looked at the shift program was because it allows us to recruit from other areas than just Greenwich, because we don't need to carry a pager, we'd be doing a shift. And we talked about some other incentives, but it's a program that's not even close to being implemented yet. So for if we're talked about this 3-man model, and if there's a volunteer on the rig as the 4th person, then it's a single engine response, it's going to be a hit or miss when that volunteer is doing that shift, if they choose to do that shift. Some volunteers like that because it gets their hours in a block of time. Some volunteers like to still respond with the pager system. So, to say we're going to be able to fill that 3rd position, that's not going to happen. To fill a 4th position and make that a single engine response for minor alarms, if you want to call it that, am I correct, Chief? We could do that part of the time. Do we set a goal if we go with this 3-man model, say, can we do it 10% of the time next year and work our way up? Well, that's something we have to sit at the table with. And I think we've had in the last 2 weeks, a great dialogue with Assistant Chief Kick and Deputy Chief Larry Roberts, how we're moving towards that progression and how we get volunteers to do that. But that's a program that's not even going to go anywhere right away.
Thank you.
Sean, from your perspective as a volunteer, as a town resident, taxpayer, do you think our fire system now is deficient in terms of response or ability to
But I'll
address?
comment, obviously, on the Northwest session. Obviously, that's a whole other discussion.
I mean, aside from the Northwest, I mean, do you think
We've gotten away with a lot in the past. We've had some, we would call near misses, you want to call them, or close calls. Does it work? It has. Could it be better? Yes, it can. So how we do that together will be the outcome of all this. How the volunteers fill their positions and their fiscal responsibility, not just as a volunteer firefighters, but fiscal responsibilities to the BET and to the board that we obviously serve as volunteers of the town of Greenwich. So,
Ms. Kieran?
Chief, I wonder if I could go back to your discussion of what the priority is now. Since I've been on the BET, what I've always heard about is a gap in service in the Northwest, and I think the rating up above the merit is 8B, and the ISO rating below the merit is 4. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the driver of the Glenville experiment was to reduce response times in the Northwest. Now, in the backdrop, we've had 4 fire persons up on North Street and at Central, but yet I've not heard discussion about perhaps one of those seats moving down to a 2-man station. So I'm just trying to understand why now is Northwest less important. It seems to have been a priority for years, and now that's shifted.
Well, it is a priority. I can go back to the question. You're giving me 1 to 2, and what do you look at first? And my first concern is the life safety in those deficient companies. And we have addressed collectively some increase to the response in Northwest Greenwich with this Glenville experiment. Did not reduce response times. It added a company that can immediately go to work upon arrival. So that reduces some of the damage of the property rather than getting a 2-person engine on site. It does not reduce response times because the station is obviously in the same place. So my concern out of the 2, and I would hope that we would be able to proceed on both fronts, because the concept of this 3-person staffing enables you to do that, is correct the life safety issues in 2-person engines. Understanding COSCOP is a 5-person station at this point, and I would implore you to continue to move forward with the property selection process in this current fiscal year. Move the ball forward. If we were to start construction today, that station would not be complete until 2016. So I would not wait on either front, to be honest with you.
Ms. Wessler?
Chief, I just wanted to understand the math in terms of your proposal, because I'm looking at this in terms of what you just handed out. And your plan here has a 3-person engine per station, including Northwest. You're adding 12 fighters. If you were to decide, or the town were to decide not to move ahead with Northwest, you could essentially reallocate your staff and not add incrementally any firefighters. Is that correct?
If you chose not to move forward with the Northwest Station, you would still have a 3-person model in place at that point. It would be in the down, if I could use the term, downtown Greenwich. If you did not move forward with that Northwest Station, I'd be standing here arguing that the Glenville Station and the Northeast Station in no way could be reduced from a 4-person company. Time and distance-wise, it would just be a tragedy to minimize those companies to a 3 or a 2-person company without the Northwest Station.
All right, I just wanted to understand the math.
Mr. Goldrick?
Chief Szynski, if I may, it seems that what you need is 4-man trucks, right? Four-man crews, not 2, not 3, but 4. And that will protect the lives of the firefighters themselves. It's the most efficient. It reduces injuries the most, so that's what you want. And you also mentioned consolidation. And if I could get you to repeat which fire stations you think are essential, and I think Northwest was one of them, but which ones, and also Round Hill, is that in any way essential, or could be, in terms of putting professionals there, and which fire stations are not essential?
Well, via the plan of conservation and development, all fire stations are essential. All right, understand that first. Let's deal with the Round Hill issue first. And sometimes these response diameters are misleading. Understand discussions we've had previously. When you start to tie the actual response times from the station out, they look more like blurbs, so they're not exact diameters. They're dependent on traffic and weather. But if you look at where the Round Hill station is located, it's right outside of that response district of North Street Station 8. So if you were to strike an agreement with the Round Hill company, and I were then to put a response blurb or diameter around, you answer your question, where is the majority of the response district? It's in Station 8's district. Not only that, but geographically, the town notably has very poor east-west routes for transportation. If my paid staff was located at Round Hill, the difficulty in getting to the King Street corridor to where the majority of these target hazards are as defined by large potential for loss of life would be extremely difficult to get to from the Round Hill. If I come back into the Northwest Territory, either a previously located piece of property, or I, as fire chief, am not opposed to that King Street corridor for some critical reasons. At least I have good north-south ability, and I have some east-west route from the King Street corridor, from the Riversville corridor. Very difficult to go John Street, East Portchuck from Round Hill to come across in there. So if you were saying, in worst-case scenario, if the day ever came where you needed to consolidate, that's going to be a discussion generated by the town, because you couldn't arbitrarily, with the geographical locations of, say, Byram and Glenville or Sound Beach and Coscow, say, I'm going to arbitrarily take out one of those stations and fully staff another, because then you've got some additional holes in response. So that's going to be a discussion that you're going to have town-wide as to if consolidation was ever on the board. And with the 3-person model, again, it's not the 4-person engine that you get to, but it gives you at least good coverage throughout town, inclusive of the Northwest Station.
So
I'm not going to recommend that you consolidate a station.
Let me continue, because I think I might have heard a little different question. So let's do some math again. We have today, right this minute, I believe you have 21 career firefighters out and about, and you have one chief, so 22.
22 a shift.
22. So we need 4 people to fill one shift on a ongoing basis. So that means you're sitting here today at 88. You got 88 in your, not you, but 88 in your ranks. So what I'm hearing is, with the plan you're looking at, is that somewhere in 3 to 4 budgets, including COSCOB and a Northwest Station, I'm not going to add any floaters in there, you're adding 12, so you're at 100. So I think, going back to what I heard the questioner, let's do the other 2 mathematical equations to see where we get. If the town at some point decided that 4 was the number we needed, we have to go over to Sound Beach and add 2. We have to go to COSCOB and add 2. We've got to go to Barm and add 2. So that's 2, 4, 6, so that's 24. And if you want 4 at Northwest Station, that's 24 plus 16. Okay? So you're now approaching your 130 number there. Those are the 2 maximum extremes, I'll call it. If the Northwest Station, if we can't strike and find a piece of real estate that works and whatever, and you did the 4, then it would be, you wouldn't have that. So you'd add 2, 4, 6 times 4, you'd add 24 to your 88. I'm just trying to give them the maximum range. I consider you're with the 3-man engine company, you're adding 12, but I'm just saying to do 24 gives you that without the Northwest, add 16 more, that gives you the Northwest. So we know the maximum exposure here. I just think that's important so we understand those numbers. Ms. Tarkington?
Yes, Chief. I'd like to ask, coming back to the Northwest, using your ideal plan, if Northwest was either on King Street or at, say, Round Hill, would both of those stations be manned with 3 firefighters? Is that correct? Or is that not correct?
No, everything's 3.
Everything would be 3. Everything would be 3.
Everything is coming to 3.
Okay, so then tell me about the type of engines or equipment that you would, use if you had a fire station on King Street and if you had one at Round Hill. Would they be the same kind of equipment, or would they be different kind of equipment?
Are you talking by Round Hill, or are you talking the North Street Station?
No, I'm just, by Round Hill, I'm meaning Round Hill. I mean, if that were, say, a location, would you staff it with, or would you use the same kind of engines?
Yeah, the engines that we're purchasing now have been downsized, so the bids that came in are a smaller, more functional engine that is still a Class A pumper as defined by the National Fire Protection Standard, but its ability to maneuver the streets of Greenwich, both backcountry with the driveways that we have and the congestion of downtown Greenwich, makes them easier to maneuver, easier to train people, and will hopefully continue to reduce the accidents that we do have.
So the engines would be identical, whether it was whatever the location was, and call it North or Northwest. Thank you.
Okay, Chief, I think this was beneficial. I must say, in 21 or 22 years, this is the first time that I see the volunteers, the career administration, and 1042 in the same room. That's really progress. That's really, from our point of view, you can see we're trying to come up with the most efficient financial success. But this is, I really appreciate it. And our decision day is just another day. And obviously, I'm sure there'll be a lot of communications going between the caucuses, on where this goes. But it's a valuable presentation. I'm looking at Peter Tessie. Do you have anything you want to add? I think please.
Good evening. I want to just thank you all for your indulgence in giving the fire administration an opportunity to discuss more in detail the issues surrounding fire coverage and life safety in the town. Clearly, this is not a new issue for Greenwich. Anybody who is acutely aware of the town's history recognizes that we go through fits and starts when it comes to making changes on any magnitude, on any given subject, but particularly in the fire services. I will just say that if you look back at the last 15 years, actually going toward 20 years, there has been a progression of activity that has occurred in the area of the fire services. I think that progression began really with the addressing of the lack of coverage with North Street in this town's decision to proceed there. Not unlike this issue, which you're doing a very thorough and investigative job of dealing with. That one did come to be in the 2000s. And since that time, the town adopted a plan to improve its fire stations, beginning with Coscob. It then proceeded to Glenville, then to Central as part of the public safety complex, which went through several hiccups, as we all know. There was a lot of misinformation about that. There was a conceptual plan to include EMS. It didn't work out, but the fact of the matter is we're back to where we started. There's going to be a new central fire station in town thanks to the BET and the RTM. From there, we acquired property on King Street, as we all know, for the purposes of a fire station. And yes, Mr. Norton reminded me, GEMS was thought of as well. That too was met with a hiccup in terms of whether or not it could accommodate both. It was determined it cannot, and we were sent on a mission to find an alternate site. In the meantime, you funded a new training tower. There was an incident in 2003 that affected the manpower, which was the adoption of the deputy chief shift commanders. That came out of a recommendation after the near fatal fire over on Davis Avenue. And that's how we wound up with the configuration of the Career Fire Administration in the combined service today. So where are we now? We're at a point as to whether or not we want to proceed with that Northwest Station, and that is related to staffing, and that is why this staffing discussion is taking place, in part because that was one of the questions that was posed. If you were going to build it, you have to staff it. That then led to, well, if you're going to staff that with 4, then what's happening to the other areas of town? So in summation, all of this is intertwined. For the casual observer listening at home or in the audience, it is all intertwined. And yes, it does involve the volunteers, and the volunteers are a valued resource to this town. They always have, and they always will be. The reality is, though, being a volunteer today is far more demanding and rigorous than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, and our economy has changed drastically. We cannot produce the number of volunteers, and I think we had that affirmed tonight, that we did 30, 40, 50 years ago, because we are not the same Greenwich we were 30, 40, or 50 years ago. So we have to assimilate all this information and strike a balance. While I was away, someone was asking me about what I did. I was simply putting it down to, if there's one word that describes what I do, and I think most of us do, is we strike a balance. And I think tonight we're on our way to striking that balance through your good efforts in seriously giving consideration to the issues at hand. These are issues that will not go away, whether I'm standing here before you in the future or someone else is sitting up there instead of all of you. If we do not act and plan today, we will be dealing with issues, the same issues tomorrow and into the future. So we're off to a better start, I think, with tonight's meeting. I do want to compliment everybody here, because I know, as I said in our caucus, in fairness, some of the people have greater institutional knowledge of this than others. And naturally, your inclination is you want to make decisions based upon the best information in order to serve the citizens and the taxpayers well. So I just want to thank you. I hope we can continue this. We can make incremental progress. We've done some so far. And I think as everyone works in tandem, we will get there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you very much. Again, everybody, really appreciate it. As it stands now, the Budget Committee had modified the First Selectman's budget to not include, I think it was at that time we were talking 9 firefighters. Let me just tell you a little bit about our process so we're all clear. That's what we call our recommended budget. That budget will be before us on Thursday night, starting early, 5 o'clock. We're trying to start a little earlier. And there could be a motion to do anything. We have, this board has that authority. I would say there could be a motion to reinstate, add, conditions, subject to release. We have sort of a lot more flexibility than the RTM would have. So that's what's on the, that's what our ability is to do at that point in time. I can say that I would say this will be a discussion amongst this board on Thursday night, so I'm just kind of giving you a heads up. I think this will be something that is hashed around, and put, there'll be an attempt to reinstate it, and we'll have that discussion. So, certainly.
Understand one thing. You're asked to provide a comprehensive plan. We found a middle ground for a comprehensive plan. It does include the Northwest Station. It does include taking care of these staffing deficiencies. And if any of you, again, I'll extend, any of you have questions, comments, reservations, or don't understand a particular aspect, please don't hesitate between now and Thursday to call and get on my case and say you didn't answer this to my best understanding, or beat us up, whatever you need to do. I would implore you. These are important decisions that you're going to make, and I think, honestly, you have the opportunity, as I said, to make an old, nervous fire chief at least somewhat calmer, knowing that the excitement that you're going to cover the town of Greenwich in good fashion. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay. What do we have left here? Let me just keep up with my... Okay.
Minutes.
Yeah, we have one more minutes to do. Minutes are done. Okay, thank you. I'm just waiting for sort of... Peter, our next item was I noted executive session in case that was needed for this discussion. If I'm understanding the scope of what you're looking for, you have been contacted by a property owner looking to dispose of a piece of property that they have. I don't know of any of the terms, conditions. I don't know what you know. From our point of view, I don't know if you're ready or if it's just a question of you're looking for us, because I think you're looking for this property for the Northwest Station, obviously. So I leave it to you. Sure. If you think we need executive session, or are we just really, I mean, it's purpose specific,
yeah,
right?
It is site specific, and it's in accordance with the Freedom of Information Commission. If you are going to meet to discuss the following matters, maybe close specific employees unless the employee's concern requests that the discussions be open to the public, strategy in negotiations regarding pending claims and litigation, security matters, real estate acquisition, if openness might increase price. So I think one can deduct if someone's telling us that they have a potential piece of property, specific property, and that they're going to put it on the market, but they want to ask us first, that then it could drive the price. So I think it's well within the means of executive session. And I know so you have to make that determination, but I will tell you,
Mr. Raymer, I'm all ears.
Well, you can be less, but I would move that we go into executive session for the purpose of this discussion.
I second. Second.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, Mr. Goldrick?
Yeah, could I try to understand that? A property owner has approached the town to sell a property. That's what you just said. You're saying that if the community knows that he'll jack up the price? would seem that he's already approached us. So why would this?
They could make it, it's not publicly known yet. They have not publicly disclosed that they are, but once we talk about it, it will. And perhaps then it's open for development, and then we become subject to a bidding for it.
Okay.
Unknown commodity versus known commodity.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion to go into executive session?
Who seconded it?
Everybody.
Everybody.
Thank you, Leslie.
Leslie, Bill, okay.
So
Okay.
we vote to enter session?
Yeah, we always vote to go into executive session. Okay.
Dispatchers, you increase the communication equipment and your redundancy in there. So the town should be looking at additional points in the communication. It only accounts for 10% of the overall formula. The second formula is with regards to water supply. Water supply accounts for 40% of the ISO grading. So since the last grading schedule came out in early 2004, you've made significant improvements to backcountry water supply with cisterns and dry hydrants. Aquarian has made significant improvements to the water supply. Just the improvement of water supply in that Binney Lane, Sound Beach area over the past year will assist in the water supply aspect as well. Now, 50% of the ISO grading is with regards to the fire department itself. And that is not only facilities, equipment, but also personnel. And you think about what has happened since 2004 when that evaluation took place, and where we are not at just yet. Don't have the training facility complete yet. There's a whole section of point values for the training facility that's being built. So that training facility was built in mind to maximize the credit that we'll get from the ability to do live fire burns to the training props of propane. So we'll get full credit with the training tower in place, which we won't get if ISO were to come in next week. Central Station isn't complete. Yes, so Central Station has a void. I don't really want to bring ISO in here for grading while we've got Horseneck staffed. The staffing issue itself, when they came in 2004, and you have to talk to Dan Morzello in greater detail, but the grading level on fire personnel that we were credited with was very low, and that's a point value that ISO looks at very favorably, the amount of firefighters, volunteers, and career that are available. Our new software tracks those response numbers per call, which is what ISO is going to want to see. So by holding off on the ISO grading until some of these issues are taking place, and at least Central Station is coming up out of the ground, we should make some significant improvement on the overall grading. If we can improve on the 4 below the merit and even move off of the 8B and backcountry, we've had a couple of instances already where insurance companies use the ISO grading schedule to set their premiums, and that breeds the competition. There's not much competition for backcountry residents for insurance right now, but in some cases where water supply has improved and the residence is close enough to an existing fire station, North Street, for example, we've actually had an insurance company come in and rate a premium based on a 6 rather than an 8B. So that improvement probably saved that particular homeowner upwards of $6,000 a year. The opposite of that is the resident who called from Bedford this afternoon and talked to our administrative assistant who said, my premium is going up well over $1,000+ in a short period of time because they're saying I don't have adequate fire protection.
So when will you redo
I was going to hold off to the end of 2014 to get those individuals in here. At least then, we've got the fire school up and running. We'll have a decision on the staffing model, the direction of the Northwest Station. Hopefully, we'll have a positive inclination of how that's going. If we can get that on the record with Central Station being constructed up out of the ground, of moving to the Northwest Station, those are significant improvements that ISO will recognize.
Thanks.
I was going to try and put off the next grading until the end of 2014. And I'm sure they were both there. They're in the process of...
Yeah, of course, yeah. Oh, yeah, you got to get on the microphone, the tape is going. Well...
Thank you to everybody who took the time to indulge in the topic tonight. It's a comprehensive one, and it requires a lot of time, and I appreciate your indulgence on it. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. Great discussion.
Thank you very much.
Let me just move to
There was some questions coming back from Vegas that it was going to be one of our members, but the award actually goes to 5 minutes and 37 seconds for 2 minutes to Mary Lee Kiernan at our work session, so I figured we needed that little bit of smile. So I have to tell you, we're going to have to reconduct. Actually, who was sitting to my right? We had the timer running, and we kept track. Thursday start time again. If anybody has a problem, we probably have all day tomorrow. We could make that change. Just let me know. Tomorrow night is our public hearing. We start at 7 o'clock. I imagine we're going to probably try to caucus ahead of time. I don't know about your caucus or post afterwards, depending on the time. I would say it is our night to listen and hear and make notes, and that's what we're here for, and I think that's important. Thursday night, decision night. I will give the following advice. We have a fair amount of forms that have been submitted for budget amendment. Pluses, minuses, conditions, subject to release, etc. It is very hard for us to take on something that we don't have a heads up in writing. It's very difficult especially if we talk about drafting any kind of language or conditions. That gets very difficult. I have asked Roland to launch all the forms that we have Wednesday morning, so we all have them. This way you can review them. Mr. Raymer and I have a fair amount. I found that 2 of our members beat me to the punch on one. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that. So basically, I'm just trying to get us ready so we're prepared. I really do believe that the square might be a better format for Thursday, but I can make that decision. April committee and district meetings. Obviously, I gave that out before. If you have a problem, let me know. There's some people traveling that I've taken into consideration, but I wanted to get this to everybody as early as I can so we have an idea. There's some pretty big assignments there. And I can't think of anything else. It's been an incredible budget process. I was going to say this tomorrow night, so I'll practice a little bit. The budget process for the BET 10 years ago started January 30th, January 31st, February 1st. And it went through all of February. It went through most of March. It was very common. I looked up some dates for us to be doing fixed charges presentation the 3rd week in March. We, this year, and this is something that's sort of different, and I go back to some of the things about what the Budget Committee recommends. This year, we brought back the schedules, partly due to school and travel and what have you. I think we ought to look at that going forward next year. It did allow us to flush out what I normally would say are the hot items of 3 or 4. This year, I think there's a lot more. So that's why my decision night, I decided to sort of bring that up a little bit earlier. But I think it was a different budget process, and I think I see everybody getting involved. That's what we really need to do. And all we need now to do is finish it up, is have good communication about what people are going to recommend and what change forms are coming, because I think that'll just help us all out. So with that, Mr. Blankley? Ms. Wesley? All those in favor? Aye. Good night, everybody.